everybody. Today I want to talk to you about what I call mental alchemy, changing the bad thoughts into good thoughts. So this is important for people with anxiety, depression, all sorts of stuff. And I want to preface this with the idea that so there's a lot of information here. Let's talk about the biopsychosocial, spiritual, cultural perspective. Okay, so biologically, there are people out there, probably about 1/4 of the people with depression, with anxiety, who have a chemically based deficiency in their brain chemicals. So thinking positive thoughts, maybe not going to help them as much as, say, an antidepressant. Okay, so please, if you're struggling with that, go seek medical attention. Okay, we also have psychological basis for things. Psychological basis is what I'm going to be working on today, for the most part. And it's about how you think in your head, that constant conscious stream going through your mind all the time. So, when we're talking about psychological stuff, that's what we're talking about. Now, the sociological aspect is your environment. What happens if you have people around you all the time, like yelling at you or telling you that you're no good? That's something you can change too. We'll talk about that in the future. Spiritual, what happens if you feel like God doesn't love you? That you don't have a purpose in life, that there's no point to your existence? Again, that's going to be another episode. And then the cultural aspects. What does our society teach us? What does society tell us about who we are? What does our culture tell us? What happens if we grow up in a culture where women aren't as valued as men, or where certain people are not valued for their existence as opposed to other people? So, another episode. But today we're talking about the mental alchemy of it all, changing our thought process and that constant conscious stream going through our mind. Now, for many of us, what happens in that constant stream of consciousness, that's tongue twister, and I've said it right so far, but at some point if it comes out conscious, you'll know what I'm talking about. So when we have that going on, that can be our best friend or it can be our worst enemy. And some of you out there are like, yep, I know that. It can be my worst enemy. Because those thoughts can become just so defeating, right? So if we're talking about our thought process, now I'm going to put some stuff together for you that I talked about in the shadow work video, that I talked about in empathy, and I just want to start synergizing all of this together for you because it is coming to a bigger point. So if you haven't watched those videos, please take a minute, watch them. Okay, so when we have a lot of anxious thoughts or depressed thoughts going through our mind, it continues to play in our mind over and over again. These are unwanted thoughts or even irrational thoughts. So these things can be very defeating, especially if we hear them over and over and over again all day throughout the day. So again, like with empathy, like with shadow work, the first part of it is to recognize that you are experiencing these thoughts. So you have to be mindful. Normally it's just droning on in the back of your head and you let it play. But you need to take a minute and listen to what your mind is telling you. And sometimes it's really not good. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, nobody loves me, I'm hated beyond all measure, like all sorts of stuff that your mind will tell you. Now you need to train your mind. You need to change those thoughts. So there are multiple ways that you can do this. One of my favorite ways to do this is to start writing those thoughts down. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh my gosh, putting it on paper? No, thank you. I'm not going to put it on paper. I don't want anybody in the world to see what I'm doing. Well, it's not about that. It's about sending the message to your brain, to your mind, that this has been recorded permanently so we don't have to remember it. One of the things I tell people, a great example is when I have ADHD, in case you haven't noticed. When I go to the grocery store, I'm bebopping along down the road trying to remember, okay, so I need milk, eggs, bread, cheese. Milk, eggs, bread, cheese. So the whole way down, I'm not listening to music on the stereo. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm thinking milk, but I am paying attention to driving, but I'm thinking milk, eggs, bread, cheese. Milk, eggs, bread, cheese. Milk, eggs, bread, cheese. And then when I walk through the doors, it's like there's an automatic mind wipe that happens. I am walking around and going, did I need peas? Peas sound familiar. No. So I've forgotten everything and it's useless. Now, the whole time I spent going to the grocery store, I was wasting that time running over it and over it and over it in my head. However, if I write it down on a little note or put it in my handy dandy phone on the notepad, I will have it with me. I'll probably still forget to look, but at least I'm not thinking the whole way to the grocery store, milk, eggs, bread, cheese, right? So I'm not focused on that as much. When we write it down or record it somewhere, it sends that message to us that we don't have to remember it anymore. And for the people in like the older generations, sometimes handwriting, and it can be younger people too. I'm not age shaming anybody. It can be useful to handwrite it out. For me, I do a lot of my communicating online, so I'm typing it out. I type it in a Word document and I let it sit there for a while until I can process it. You can also text it to yourself if you are an audio type of person. Speak it out on a voice recorder on your phone. Do a voice message for yourself. So you can do that, absolutely. So that's one way that you can start to work on it. You get it out of your head. That's the first step. The next thing is you start to replace it with new stuff. Now remember, we talked about the ruts in a road. Over time, those ruts get deeper and deeper and deeper if we continue to drive on them. And when we decide to change course and get out of those ruts, it's really hard because they're deep. Especially if you have anxiety and depression from your thought process, those ruts are super deep. So what you can do is you can start moving over and get out of those ruts and create new ruts, the healthy ruts. So to get out of this, we have to use a lot of effort at first, but it gets a lot easier when we're out of it. So we've got these thoughts out, okay? They're on paper. One of the things that I found is it suddenly starts getting easier once I get it out. Maybe not the first day afterwards, but a couple days after, it starts to let loose. And if I continue to go back to that idea, like I have this written down, I don't have to remember it, then that starts to let go of the power that those thoughts have. Then I start to replace them with new thoughts. Now, I've heard some people say, oh, well, if you think you're ugly, for example, you tell yourself you're pretty. Well, if you feel like that's a lie, that's never going to stick. You have to find something good about yourself. You have to find something positive about yourself. And maybe the most positive thing you can find is I have good friends, or maybe it's not even technically about yourself, but I have good friends who love me. I have a job that I'm good at. Everybody has something good in their life. You just have to focus on that and spend time focusing on that. Okay, so when you get the irrational fears going on, like everybody will hate me if I put down a boundary, which will be another topic at some point, boundaries. Everybody will hate me if I put down a boundary. Okay, is that true? No. If a person loves you and you put down a boundary in a healthy way, then they should respect that boundary. They shouldn't be angry at you for that boundary, because That's just you telling people where you're at in life, and that's okay. So, speaking out is another way that we can do this. We can fix this, okay? So, speaking out those positive things that you have in yourself. When you hear that voice saying, like, for instance, you're useless, okay? Then you can say out loud, if you want, you can say, I'm not useless because I'm good at, or I do really good in this situation, or I'm not useless because this person loves me. Even if it's your cat, it's okay. I have 3 cats and they are very good emotional support animals most of the time when they're not getting stuck on tree trunks and stuff, which is what they're doing right now. So what we can do is we can work on those thoughts. We can challenge those thoughts. And we're creating that new rut in the road that's harder to get out of and back to that old way of thinking. And this takes a lot of work. I cannot tell you how much work it takes because it's every day, all day. You have to put in the mental work to do it. However, let me tell you this from my own personal experience, it's way more exhausting to live in that life where your brain is telling you horrible things all the time than it is to live in a life where your brain is in synchronicity with you, where you are living a happy life, where you don't have those negative thoughts driving you down all day, every day. So, first thing you do is write them down. Then you start to challenge them. When you're challenging them, you can speak it out loud. You can write it down also. You can do whatever you want. You can cross stitch it into one of those samplers. Like, you do you. Whatever represents how you think, who you are as a person, do it. As you work at it over time, it will get easier because your constant conscious stream can become your best friend. So that when you do something out in the world, you'll hear your mind say, that was really good. Good job. Instead of, wow, you really screwed that up. That was horrible. Man, you might get fired over that one. That was so bad. No, your mind really can become your best friend. But you have to do the mental work, the mental alchemy to change it from lead to gold. And once you do that, you can feel a lot better. So I highly recommend giving these tricks a try. And in the future, I'm going to share more ideas for you. So please check back. Have a great day, y'all.